Hey guys, welcome back. So as you can tell, CurlyHairLove is back.
Hello.
So we decided today we're going to do a video on advice, and the advice that we're going to give today is about interviewing. I wouldn't say that we're experts, but we've definitely been through a lot of interviews, and she's actually working in a field where she's actually applied for several jobs, and she's finally gotten into a field that she went to school for. So she can kind of give you like that aspect on it. And from my aspect, I've been through a lot of interviews as well as being someone who interviews people. So I can kind of talk about like what as a manager people are looking for. And just remember, we're not experts, and just because we give this advice does not mean this is going to work for every interview, but we're going to give our best advice and hopefully it helps you out a little bit.
Yeah. What are your greatest strengths? And you're definitely probably going to get this in every interview that you do, because they want to see how you answer this question, how you approach this question. Are you full of it? Do you think you're the best person ever? Or are you a realist? And they might be looking for one thing one way or the other, but it's definitely important to highlight not only good strengths about yourself professionally, but things that make sense for the job. So I wouldn't be going into a film interview talking about how great I am at answering phones, because that's not related to doing the job. It might be something that I've done in the past and I am good at, but it doesn't make sense. So that would be, like, I'm great at like X, Y, and Z with cameras, and I love telling stories. Like, those kinds of things make a lot more sense.
Yeah, I feel like when you talk about strengths as well, one thing that you want to stay away from is trying to be too humble. Like, don't be ashamed of your strengths, and also don't go into it like being unsure. Like, don't be like, well, my mom says that this, and my friends say this, but I don't really see it. Like, don't be proud of your strengths. Like, we all have them, and that's one of the big things that employers are looking for. But don't go into there so cocky that they're just like turned off by how much you brag about yourself. So make sure that you're relating it to the job, but you're also not hurting yourself by being too cocky.
Yeah, you really need that happy medium. It's not easy to hit, but with some practice, I'm sure that you guys can do it, because somehow we did, so.
Somehow we managed to do some things.
Yeah.
With great strengths comes great weaknesses. So when you talk about weaknesses, I feel like that's something that I struggle with as well, just because I don't like talking bad about myself, because you're kind of afraid of this being like the thing where they go, oh, well, we're not hiring someone with that weakness. And you also have to realize that you don't have to tell them your greatest weakness. Like, spin it in a way where it's a positive thing. So you still like, okay, so something that I've struggled with in the past is this, or this is a great time to be like, well, in previous jobs, people thought this was a weakness. And I like to spin it as, this is what people thought was my weakness, and then spin it around and be like, but because of this, this is a strength. So I was told that in sales, because I'm very quiet and soft-spoken, that my personality wouldn't be good at sales. And I've worked in 3 Fortune 500 companies and gone to the top. So I can tell that that's something that a lot of people in sales might think is a weakness, but I've shown them that it's not so much a weakness. It might not be their way of getting to the top, but it's something that people have reflected on me as a weakness. So that's something I like to look at and be like, so I'm soft-spoken, but for me, I feel like that's because I like to listen to what people do, and then I can relate it back to them. So there's always a way you can spin weaknesses without destroying yourself. Like, don't be like, oh, I have really bad anxiety. Oh, I'm always late for work. And like, you don't, those things, those are weaknesses. And if you have them, those are things that you need to work on, but it's not something you want to share in an interview.
Yes, because again, you're trying to paint the best picture of yourself. And so you want to share like the nice weakness, like the one that's actually not that bad. And you want to be able to show that you kind of have room to grow, and that, you're real with yourself, but you also are going to be able to still be a good fit at that company. So one that I share a lot is that I'm a very detail-oriented person. And so sometimes it slows me down because I'm really focused on the details. And so I might not finish a project as quickly as the next person, but then I don't miss much. And so my projects are usually done a little bit better because I don't rush through things, and it's hard for me to miss details, and that makes me a strong employee.
And I mean, you can sit there and also say you may take more time on your projects, but you are also very good at time management. So some other people that you might compete against might get their projects done within a day or two, but you've got 5 days to finish it. So you're going to take time, the whole 5 days, to get that project done. And that's a way of kind of spinning that into like a positive light and be like, well, I'm detail oriented, but the nice thing about my projects is I only have to do it once.
Right.
Whereas someone that rushed through something might have gotten it done before the deadline very quickly, but they might also have to redo it 3 or 4 times before it becomes a quality product, like something that you did on the first try.
Absolutely. And I think something like that also really speaks to your work ethic, which is important and something that they want to hear in a job interview. So
Exactly.
So the next one is, what are your goals for the future? And you could just dream away and tell them about your favorite job that you're going to have in like 20 years, but you probably want to scale it back a little bit and make sure that it applies to the job that you're applying for. So me applying for a job in digital media and film, I would probably talk about how I want to tell stories online and I want to grow and get to be a better video producer, you know, like kind of reeling it in and not necessarily dreaming super big, because of course they want to know that you're an ambitious person, but they also again want to know that you're going to fit the job. So
yeah, they won't hire you if they think that you are taking that job as temporary as possible, because they're going to spend time training you at your job. And if they are investing time and money into you as an employee of theirs, they don't want to hire someone that seems like they're going to be out the door next month.
I mean, hiring someone is very much an investment for a company because, you know, like depending on the job, like they have to give you benefits and they're going to have to pay you and like they're going to spend their time training, like you said. And so it's definitely important.
Yeah, so talk about your future and maybe wrap in some pointers of why you think that job is going to help move you towards your future. A lot of times I've talked about like, oh, I want to do life coaching stuff, and when it comes to life coaching, it's people skills. So any job that I have, it's people skills. You're never going to have a job where there's not another person involved. So I just talk about like dealing with customers, dealing with management, and on tons of different levels. I mean, even like when I was training for past jobs, I kind of felt like the training, like the teacher or the coach, whatever that was training us, that was kind of like more of a job that I would want. So like I would talk about, oh, I'd like your job, like to move up, I would like to learn this company and then maybe one day do what you're doing, like help train people, because that's what I want to do, is coach people. So just always finding a way to say, I want to stay at this job and learn this, and this, which is going to take a while, which I would really enjoy the opportunity to do this. Don't be like, oh, this is just a job that's going to look good on a resume because this is the job I actually want in the future.
It's not. Nope, don't do that.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years? So I feel like this question has been asked even before I was like applying for jobs. Like even when you're looking in colleges, I felt like applying for colleges, that was a question that they asked as well. And I mean, I definitely think having plans, like even when you work a job, they usually ask for like a 30, 60, 90. Like, are you making plans to take the stepping stones to get where you want? So having a 5-year plan, it's great to have. And I feel like you definitely want to try to work in how this job is part of those stepping stones within those 5 years. So I don't think it would hurt to say that this is the idea of what I would like to have in 5 years. Like I would like to have a job in this field and I would like to be making this amount of money, because I think talking about the amount of money that you're wanting to like have kind of lets them know that you're setting some higher goals for yourself, and you don't want to go into the interview and just like looking dumbfounded by a question of where do you see yourself in 5 years.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it's really a question to measure your ambition. Like, do you have plans for the future? Are you kind of just wandering into this room because they decided they'd interview you? You know, like you need to match it to what you'd be doing in the job and how you could grow from it, because again, they're looking hopefully for some kind of longevity where you're going to stay and you're going to grow yourself, but you're also going to help the company. So it's important to have some kind of answer for this question. It doesn't mean that you need to be like, I'm going to be living in this house with this car and have this exact job, but just kind of even a looser idea of the direction that you want to grow in is important, and I think is something that they want to hear.
Yeah, you can definitely talk about like the things that you want to achieve within that position. You're like, well, within 5 years, I would like to have achieved this here. And just telling them things that you want to achieve, like, I want to be the top of this. I want to have produced this many things. I would like to have been part of this many projects. Like, stuff like that is what they want to hear. Like, they want to know that you are super interested in having them being part of that 5-year plan. And I think a lot of people would be happy to hear those types of things.
Definitely. This one is definitely also one that you need to put a positive spin on. It is, can you tell me about a difficult work situation and how you overcame it? So this is probably where you tell kind of like your win story. And it could be different depending on your work situation. And maybe if you're like newer to job searching and you don't have a lot of work experience, you could even talk about, say, working on a group project in school and how you dealt with someone who maybe wasn't pulling their weight, or, you know, like you just kind of need to find one of those situations that isn't horrible, didn't end badly, and you can spin in a positive way that kind of applies to the job, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely think, because when I was first out of college, like my only experiences were really college. Like, yes, I worked in the dorms, yes, I had a few part-time jobs here and there, but it was really the college experience. And talking about difficult, like, college is not always easy, especially group projects. Like, I hated group projects just because when it came to dealing with people, like, not everyone had the drive that I had through college. So having to deal with people like that and knowing that my grade was being affected, like, jobs are looking for that. Like, they want to see that they've got a team player and that you're the type of person that can handle really bad situations and still come out on top, because life is not perfect. And they don't want to hire someone who's going to have a mental breakdown and then quit because the first problem comes their way. So talking about different, like, even talking, like, if you didn't go to school or don't have group projects, like relationships with family, like if you've got a not so great relationship with someone in your family, like, you can talk about how you've overcome something like that in an interview, and they will take that. They just want to see that you've come across a difficult situation and you became a better person because of it.
Absolutely.
So this question is about salary and range and expectations. So I feel like this is something that I feel like is taboo in the workplace, but shouldn't be, because I think it's important to know your worth. So going into an interview, make sure that you're not selling yourself short or taking less than you deserve, because believe me, companies will give you less than you deserve.
They'll be happy to.
Like,
They'll be saving money.
Like, if the job, like, if you think the amount of work that they're going to be expecting of you is worthy of more than what they're offering, like, up front, like, don't be afraid to say that. I know that, like, I've talked to a lot of people where they feel, like, I've talked to females who feel like they will be looked at negatively if they ask for more. And whereas men, they don't seem to have as much of an issue, because they are kind of looked at as like the man of the house. So that's just way, like, time has been. But now we're getting to the point where the women pull just as much weight now as well, and it shouldn't be as taboo to ask for a pay raise. Like, and if they are saying this is what we're going to give you, shoot high and then compromise. And I don't think that's a bad thing to do in an interview, because that's how you're supporting yourself. And if it's a career, like, you also have to take into consideration that if it's not something you've done a lot of, so if it's your first job, you might have gone to college for this, but it's still your first job in that field. So know your worth, but also realize that where you're at in life, you might be starting at the bottom, but it's never gonna hurt to be like, so living here is a little expensive, like, this is what I'm looking for. Like, budget, know your budget, and know the type of life you want to live, and don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, it's definitely important to do your research, and there are, like, other ways to approach this question. Like, it was one that I honestly, especially in first interviews, would dance around, because I wanted to make sure that the conversation was just more about my skill set and, like, the things that I felt applied most to the job, because of course your salary is important, but for me, I was also looking for a job that was a good fit for kind of where I wanted to take my career. And so not that I didn't care at all about money, but I wanted the focus to be on that. And I wanted them to know that that was more important to me, because then I wasn't seen as someone who was just coming in for the money. Like, I really wanted my passion to match this role. And so that's how I tended to spin it when I was interviewing.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people can find the negative aspect of asking for money, and you don't want to ever come across like asking too much. Like, and you don't want to be really pushy about that because you're in a job interview, but you also have to show that, like, as much as you want the job, they should also want you as much. So you, by asking for more, that shows confidence. Like,
Right.
that's, I'm worth this much. So asking for more actually shows the confidence level that you have in yourself. Like, you believe that's what you're worth. And if you shoot really low, that does show that you lack the confidence. You're like, oh, I'm not really sure I'm worth that much. But going into the interview, like, I've gone into sales interviews after I was top in sales in another company, and when they showed me a number, I was just like, no, I know that I'm good at what I'm doing. Like, I know that when I take this job that I'm going to go to the top. So I was like, how about we readjust that a little bit? And it's okay to do that sometimes. But like you were saying, I think showing that you're taking this job because you're passionate about it, that's really good as well, because everything that you're passionate about isn't always going to bring in the most money, like especially if you're working for like a nonprofit or something. You don't want nonprofits, you don't want to be like, okay, well, I can't afford to live off of that, because nonprofits are great places to work as well. And usually in those situations, you're finding people with more heart than money, and working for a company like that can be really good because you're going into work and you're happy and you're passionate about what you're doing, and it's not about the money, it's about the passion and the projects you're working on. So
Absolutely. There's kind of two sides to it, but I think just have a plan for that question and then you'll be fine either way.
Exactly, it's gonna come up.
Don't let it scare you. Why should we hire you? Here's your opportunity to be confident but not cocky. And you gotta rock that line well, because otherwise they're gonna run for the hills screaming. So I think you have to kind of find the balance and not just be like, well, I'm a wonderful person, everyone loves me, so, you know, I'll be such a great fit for this team. You have to more so go back to your basics and your skill set and kind of connect why they connect with this job and why you would be a good person for this job. What makes you unique? Why should they hire you?
Exactly. I feel like it's very important to make sure that you're giving them all the good examples of why they should hire you, and just repeating stuff that you've already talked about in an interview, because sometimes interviews can be pretty lengthy, and reiterating on things that you think are good to focus on. It's never bad to repeat skill sets that you have in this type of question, just because something you said in the last question might have completely made them forget about what you said somewhere else, because sometimes your answers will just be so offsetting, they're just like, whoa. And then just bring them back and be like, okay, remember, these are my skill sets and this is why I think I deserve it.
Yeah. Last but not least,
So
the important question.
The last one that is on our page right now, and it is, do you have any questions? There should never be an interview where you go, oh no, I'm good. Like, you should always have questions.
I'm embarrassed to admit I used to do that. I'd be like, no, I'm good. But that was like when I was interviewing for internships and I didn't know better. Unfortunately, no one taught me this. I had to learn it for myself, so.
Yeah, so when it comes to this one, like, the big question that I always ask is there anything that you're scared about hiring me? Because then that gives them the opportunity to be like, oh, so you seem very timid, you seem shy, you seem a little nervous. Like, they will point out the flaws that they are writing down about you of why they don't want to hire you. And you can literally ask, like, hey, is there a reason why you don't think that you would hire me? So, because a lot of times we make judgments about people, like if you slouch in an interview, if you are doing anything that they're just like, oh, nope, not gonna happen. Like, that's a time to clear that up. And you can also ask questions that weren't really asked in the interview. If you're researching that company before you apply for it, then there might be some blank spots that you don't know about the company that you can ask here. And also, like, it's your turn to kind of flip the interview over onto them and see if you, like, they're a good fit for you. Like, be like, so if this situation happens, like, what would you guys do? To kind of flip it back on them, because now if they hire you, you also want to make sure that they're people you want to work with.
Absolutely. And that was kind of the approach that I took whenever I had the opportunity to ask questions. I always wanted to get a sense of the company culture. Because personally that's important to me. I mean, I probably could work somewhere where I didn't mesh well with people, but I think especially in the creative field, you need to be able to mesh well, because then you share ideas and you just work together better. So I always love to ask, why do you love working here? Like, what's different, you know, and hear their perspective, because you can tell right away if someone is passionate about what they do, if they're passionate about their company, or they're just like, oh, well, you know, good benefits or whatever. Like, it's just a good way to get a sense of the culture. And then also asking maybe a little bit more about the role, if there's anything that's not clear to you, maybe some of the department's goals, just kind of also getting a sense of where they're headed and if you're going to be a good match for that, because that's important. You want to at least kind of like going to work every day.
Yeah, and I mean, knowing like the stepping stones that you can take in the company that might not be clear on like the website that you applied on. Just like, so how quickly do people move up in the company? What are other careers that I can move out of? Like, what did the person do before me? Like, what is expected of me? What was the downfall of someone that lost the job or moved up? Like, what are things that you think that I could bring to the table? It's just, the more information you can get from them, the more interested you seem in the position as well. And they like to answer those types of questions. Most people like to talk about themselves.
Yes.
And brag about themselves, especially as a company. They want that time to be able to brag about how well they're doing. So the last thing I wanted to kind of just bring up before we ended the video was like weird questions that have been asked that aren't really generic questions that companies kind of ask to like kind of either break the ice or just kind of like see if you can think on your feet. And two that I've had is, what's my favorite Disney villain? And that was like applying for a healthcare job. And I was sitting there, I was just like, that's a really odd question. And I was just like, Ursula. And they're like, why? And I was just like, because I feel like she was really evil. And if we're going to choose like a villain, you want someone who's evil. And she was a very evil person.
Yep.
Like, she tricked a teenage girl into signing a contract so that she could gain power over Atlantis because she knew that she could use the daughter against the dad. Like, that's just pure evil.
Yep.
Using someone's like naive vision of the world against them. I was just like, yep, that's it. And then I had the question of, when you get on an elevator, what side of the elevator do you stand on? And after the interview, I realized why people ask that question. And my answer was, I usually stand on the side with the buttons if it's open. Just because you press the button and you just kind of stand there. Like, I don't press it and then move. But I also, like, when I'm there, I'm a people person. So I will ask, what floor are you going to? And I even threw in, when we were like in California for VidCon, how I'm so used to the buttons being on one side of the elevators. And it took me about a week in our hotel, they were on the opposite side. And I'd always like kind of spin into the elevator and I'm like, oh, other side. But I was just like, oh, perfect way to end my interview there with a weird question like that. But it got me the job.
Yeah, I think you just kind of have to go in with an open mind and be ready to think on your feet a little, because that's the reason that companies are asking these weird questions that like aren't at all related to the job, because they want to see how you think on your feet and if you can think on your feet, because that's an important skill to have for a lot of jobs.
Yeah, they really want to see if you're able to answer questions that haven't been rehearsed, because in a lot of situations you're going to come up against things that you can't rehearse for, and it's how you're just going to react in that moment. So be ready for those types of questions too.
Definitely.
Well, that's all we've got for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed this and were able to get some good information about that. If you've got any comments or anything, please leave them in the comment section below. I will try to answer as many questions, and I'm sure Cassie will also look for your questions on my video. There are so many questions on here, and we spent so much time answering it that we actually divided this into 2 videos. The second half is going to be on her channel, CurlyHairLove, so definitely go check those out if you like this type of video. And make sure you give her a subscribe because she posts awesome videos on her channel.
Oh, thanks.
And I hope I will see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.